Let's dive right in. Today, we're exploring the ultimate micro-thrillers of history. We're looking at the deeply human, downright wild stories of courage and sheer ingenuity it took to pull off history's absolute greatest escapes. We're talking about individuals who stared down totally insurmountable odds and yet somehow found a way out. So it begs the question, right? How do you escape the inescapable? It's a premise that hooks us every single time. Just imagine facing impossibly high stakes. We're talking heavily guarded military harbors, freezing winter sieges. How in the world do you pivot from certain doom and pull off a flawless breakout? Well, to answer that, here's our roadmap for this explainer. We'll hit 5 key themes: hiding in plain sight, digging through the darkness, masters of extreme concealment, systemic networks of liberation, and finally, the legacy of escape. And we are covering a massive timeline here, spanning all the way from Empress Matilda in the 12th century to Casanova in the 18th, right up to Ari Neve in the 20th century during World War II. What this shows us is that the universal pursuit of freedom, it totally transcends eras. The tactics might evolve, sure, but that raw human drive stays exactly the same. All right, let's jump right into Section 1, Hiding in Plain Sight, the Art of Disguise. Now look at the incredible shared tactic between these two vastly different men from entirely different centuries. On one hand, you've got British Lieutenant Ari Neve posing as a German guard at the infamous Colditz Castle in 1942. On the other, an enslaved man named Robert Smalls posing as a Confederate captain on the steamer Planter in 1862. Both of these guys realized a brilliant truth. Sometimes the absolute best way to escape a fortress is to just look like you belong there. Let's actually break down the stakes for Robert Smalls, because this is a literal micro-thriller. He risked certain death for his family by commandeering a noisy, smoke-belching Confederate steamer in the pitch black. You can almost smell the briny scent of Charleston Harbor. He throws on the actual captain's straw hat to impersonate him in the dark. He then navigates right past Confederate gun batteries and the imposing Fort Sumter, blows the exact required whistle signal, 2 long, 1 short, and casually approaches the Union ship onward, quickly raising a white bedsheet. Can you imagine the sheer tension breaking when he finally shouts out to the Union captain, "I've brought you some of the old United States guns, sir." I mean, in that one single moment, he hands over the ship, completely cripples a piece of Confederate logistics, and claims his family's freedom. Unbelievable. Moving right along to Section 2, Digging Through the Darkness, Brute Engineering. Okay, picture this. It's 1756, and Giacomo Casanova is locked in the Piombi prison. He's directly beneath the sweltering lead roof of the Venetian Doge's palace. It was literally designed to be inescapable. But Casanova? He proved that relentless intellectual determination can beat stone and iron. Teaming up with a fellow inmate, he used a concealed spike to painstakingly pry open the floorboards and literally crawl his way through the rafters in the dead of night. Now, keep that sheer brute determination and scale it way up. We get this incredible heist sequence orchestrated by Union officers Colonel Rose and Major Hamilton at Libby Prison in 1864. They broke into a rat-infested basement, fittingly dubbed Rat Hell. They chipped right into a chimney, hid all the excavated dirt under a straw-covered floor to fool the guards, and then tunneled 50 feet over 17 agonizing days to a nearby tobacco shed. You can just feel the slow, nerve-wracking tension give way to pure relief when Colonel Rose finally broke through the earth. He turns back to his men and declares, "The Underground Railroad to God's country was open." It was a total masterpiece of covert engineering using 3 different relief teams working in absolute total darkness. 109. That is the staggering number of Union officers who escaped Libby prison completely undetected that night. And get this, here's my favorite detail. When the stampede of escaping prisoners actually made a noise, a Confederate sentry just assumed the sound was a clumsy guard knocking over a coffee pot. Talk about a lucky break. Okay, on to Section 3. Masters of Extreme Concealment, using the environment. Faced with capture by her cousin Stephen of Blois, Empress Matilda engineered one of the absolute greatest escape stories in all of English history. Back in 1142, she was trapped in a freezing winter siege at Oxford Castle. But instead of giving up, she actually used that brutal winter weather to her complete advantage. She was lured from the castle walls in the dead of night. She wrapped herself in a heavy white cloak so she'd camouflage perfectly against the thick snow. Then, she strapped these crude ice skates to her feet and quietly glided right across the frozen River Thames to safety. It honestly sounds like a scene straight out of a Hollywood movie, but this actually went down in the 12th century. Now, sometimes concealment means enclosing yourself entirely. And in 1849, Henry Box Brown did exactly that. He quite literally shipped himself out of slavery in Richland to freedom in Philadelphia. He tucked himself inside a wooden box that was just 3 feet long, 2 feet wide, and 2.5 feet high. He endured 26 hours of rough handling on the Adams Express. It is just a stunning, heartbreaking, and ultimately triumphant testament to human endurance. Which brings us to Section 4. Systemic Networks of Liberation, the Power of Community. Let's define exactly what this network was, because it's crucial. The Underground Railroad was not a literal train, of course. It was a highly covert network of safe houses, churches, and courageous citizens who totally defied the law to help enslaved people escape. And look, after the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, those risks intensified massively, which sets the stage for one of its absolute most legendary conductors. 70. That is the estimated number of people Harriet Tubman personally led to freedom. And she didn't just do this once, right? She crossed back into incredibly hostile territory for 13 harrowing, highly strategic rescue missions. Harriet Tubman possessed just unmatched tactical genius. Armed with a pistol for protection, relying on incredibly detailed terrain knowledge in the North Star, Harriet Moses Tubman famously never lost a single passenger. Her moral clarity and her strategic mind were, quite frankly, an absolute force of nature. And finally, Section 5, the legacy of escape, why this matters. So what's the big takeaway here? Well, every single one of these escapes rippled outward. They weren't just isolated stunts. Matilda's actions eventually led to the Treaty of Wallingford. Casanova's breakout literally embarrassed Venice into forcing prison reforms. Ari Neve's detailed maps of Colditz provided incredibly vital intelligence for MI9. And Tubman's scouting skills directly led to the Combahee River Raid, which liberated over 700 enslaved people. They exposed security weaknesses, and more importantly, they saved generations. So I'll leave you with this. Did these historical figures simply break out of physical prisons, or did they completely shatter the illusion of their captors' invincible power? When you look at it through that lens, you realize the unconquerable human desire for freedom is the ultimate force of historical change. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope it leaves you curious to uncover even more of these incredible stories of human resilience.